A warm welcome to everyone joining us. So welcome to the session today. We're going to give our colleagues a few seconds for them to join in. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Check out our chat box and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're calling in from, your organization. You can also feel free to put your name. Welcome for those who are still joining. We'll give them a few seconds to log in. Great. Allow me to start us off. A warm welcome to today's discussion entitled The Future of Transitional Justice Amidst the Realities of Environment and Climate Change Challenges in Conflict and Post-Conflict Societies. Our panelists in this session are joining us They are joining us from Canada, from Ukraine, from Syria, and from South Sudan. So a few logistical notes. The session is going to last 1.5 hours, and the session is being recorded. We also have translation. The chat can be used by yourself to introduce yourself. Feel free to use that. And we're also going to use the chat to look for the questions that you're going to post. So feel free to use the chat as well to post your questions, but also your comments and your insights on the discussion that is going on today. We're going to have a question and answer session after the 4 presenters have presented, and we're going to post their bios in the chat. I will introduce them briefly, but the larger bio, you'll find it in the chat. So visit our chat box. More information on the association and the upcoming events will also be put on the chat. Before we start, allow me to recognize the day today. Today is 7th October 2025, 2 years since the Hamas attack on Israel. 2 years since the Israel Defense Forces retaliated on those attacks. The scenario created was a humanitarian catastrophe, but also an ecological catastrophe. The United Nations Environmental Program last month, that is September 2025, just released a second assessment report on the environmental impact of the conflict that began 2 years ago on the ecosystems and the ecologies. This report is a critical tool, like many other reports that have been done by the UNEP, to support the pillars of transitional justice, especially that of truth-telling. If you like, an environmental approach to truth-telling. But UNEP is not the only partner who's working in these issues in that area. We have other actors who are also working towards addressing the complex environmental challenges in the crisis I just mentioned, through trust building, dialogues, cooperation, and joint action among communities in Palestine, Jordan, and Israel. And one of those partners will tomorrow, on 8th of October 2025, be awarded the 2025 Al-Mumin Award for thought leadership in environmental peace building. The 2025 Al-Mumin Award and Distinguished Lecture of Environmental Peace Building will be going to Nada Majdalani, Palestine Co-Director EcoPeace Middle East, Yana Abu Taleb, the Jordan Co-Director EcoPeace Middle East, Gidon Brumberg, the Israel Co-Director at EcoPeace Middle East, and Dr. Tarek Abu Hamed, the Executive Director at Arava Institute for Environmental Studies. A hearty congratulations to our colleagues and friends. Find the link to the awards ceremony that will be taking place tomorrow on the chat as well. Welcome and join us in that discussion for tomorrow. At this juncture, allow me to welcome Annika Pearson, the manager of the Path to Ottawa series and facilitator of the NPACS field, and a facilitator in the field of environmental peace building, for a few remarks. Annika, welcome.
Thank you, Munini. Thank you so much for hosting this conversation and for inviting me to contribute a couple of remarks today. I really just wanted to say a warm welcome on behalf of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, both to those of you who are here live and those of you who will be watching the recording later on. It's really a pleasure to have you all here in this space. And I wanted to just provide a couple of stop points. For some of you, you know exactly what the association is, you know exactly what the conference is, and you know exactly what the Path to Ottawa is. But for those of you who are not aware, the Environmental Peacebuilding Association and the University of Ottawa will collaborate to host the 4th International Conference on Environmental Peacebuilding next year from the 16th to the 19th of June, so 2026, in Ottawa, Canada. Actually, yesterday was the priority deadline for proposals. So if you're completely new to this, we'll throw a link in the chat, and you can always sort of submit a proposal as there is still space. But yesterday was the deadline for proposals. And in the run-up to that conference, we're hosting this space here. These online conversations, these online sessions that we're calling the Path to Ottawa. We have a series of events on different topics across the environmental peacebuilding field that provide a space either for those who maybe can't get to Ottawa in person, or for those who have a lot that they want to build conceptually towards that conference that we'll have next year. It's an online space for us to gather, really. I'll put a link in the chat to the Path to Ottawa as well, and just extend a warm welcome. We're accepting proposals for other events just like this in case you're interested in joining us. And we also have a couple of flagship initiatives that we've created, including a visual story gallery on environmental peacebuilding and a glossary on environmental peacebuilding. So here is that link in the chat. Finally, I'll just add, for anybody who is here live and looking for translation into other languages, you do that by clicking at the bottom of your screen, that CC button. It's in English for me, so it says show captions. And then you'll find a little triangle that you can click and toggle open translation and select the language of your choosing. I think that's all from me, and I'm going to hand back over to Munini.
Thank you very much, Annika, and thank you for that introduction to the events that we're having towards the 4th International Conference on Environmental Peacebuilding, and everyone is welcome to book the flight tickets. It's early enough, and join us there. So without much ado, allow me to welcome our panelists and to start us off in the discussion. Our first panelist is coming to us from Syria, Ms. Simav Hassan. Ms. Simav Hassan works at the Syrians for Truth and Justice. She is a Kurdish journalist and human rights activist, and her work focuses on victims' rights, transitional justice, climate justice, and gender sensitivity. Ms. Simav, the floor is yours. Welcome, and share with us the insights from your end.
Thank you so much, Munini, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. I will be representing Syrians for Truth and Justice. Syrians for Truth and Justice is a human rights organization established in 2015 and has been working since 2015 on documenting human rights violations against Syrians inside of Syria and in the neighboring countries, regardless of the perpetrator. Our work in documenting environmental violations started simultaneously with documenting human rights violations, given that in Syria, the violations were not only committed against people, it was committed against environment too. And this was our approach. People has the right to access the environmental resources. People has right to access water, to access green cover. And preventing them from this access is a violation. We have been working on documenting, I'm sharing my screen meanwhile, we have been working on documenting water violations, deforestation in Syria, and also we have been trying to come up with a strategy or a plan alongside with other organizations in order to see what should be done now in Syria, what is the next step. So allow me to start with, I will just, okay. I hope my screen is visible to you now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Perfect. Okay, so I will start with talking about what are the most pressing and urgent issues we have related to environment and in alignment with conflict. We have weaponization of water. We have Syria's rivers, our scarcity of water in Syria's rivers, specifically in transborder rivers. We have deforestation, and we have also climate change, and absolutely conflict intensifies the damage. And last in my presentation, I will be talking about how transitional justice in the Syrian context can address the environmental harms. So allow me to start by talking about drinking water. I will be talking about one case in each issue. So regarding drinking water, since 2019, the Turkish-backed national army has took over a town called Serekaniye Rasline. This town had one of the main pumping stations that was the primary source of drinking for nearly 1 million residents in Hasake and countryside. This pumping station is called Alok Water Pumping Station. Till today, it was blocked since 2019, and until today, it is unfortunately still blocked. So this view here, this image here, is like a daily life in Hasake, where tanks are distributed all around the neighborhoods, and people are relying on them in order to get free water. The other source of water is the water that they are obliged to buy from tanker trucks, which is sometimes a burden for their economical situation. So as I mentioned, over 800,000 residents in Hasake are deprived from their right to access to water. And also the IDP camps surrounding Hasake, at least 4 of them doesn't have a sustainable water resource. So this is one case I wanted to talk about regarding the weaponization of water. Depriving people's right from accessing to water is not only happening in Hasake, it also happened many times in the Syrian war context. For example, when the regime was trying to siege a place, trying to get inside one place that the former opposition was taking over, the first thing that the regime was doing was punishing the people in these areas by water. Unfortunately, this scenario has not stopped after the fall of Syrian regime in December 8th. In Sueda incidents, this was repeated. The people from Sueda were deprived from the right in accessing water because the central government has cut off the water from Sueda. Weaponizing water is a repeated scenario that was happening in the Syrian war context and still happening until now. Moving forward to rivers, I will be speaking about Euphrates and Khabur. Euphrates is one of the greatest river, or a great river in the Middle East at least. It enters Syria from Turkey, flows through Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, then it goes toward Iraq. So it's a transborder water resource. It's central for water supply, irrigation, hydroelectrical power, and also for livelihood. On the other hand, Khabur is a smaller river, 320-kilometer river. It is one of Syria's important rivers, especially for the region of Al-Hasaka, my hometown, measured for agriculture, for livelihood, for fishery, and also absolutely for local ecosystem. So Euphrates case is sorry, I moved to the last slide. Okay. So yeah, I was saying that Euphrates case is really important, given that as a transborder water source, there was only one protocol that regulate the release of the water from the Turkish area from Turkey inside of Syria. So there was only one protocol signed in 1983 between Syria and Turkey. talking about matters of pertaining the economical cooperation between Syria and Turkey. And Article 6 from this convention is talking about Turkey undertaking, releasing a yearly average of 500 cubic meter inside of Syria. This rate has decreased over the years. It reached 200 cubic meters at certain times in 2021, and the Ministry of Water in Aleppo was talking last night about the rate of 250 cubic meter per second, which is like half of the amount that Turkey should be releasing inside of Syria. So the reduced flow and is directly affecting the agricultural situation in the area. Land in the Euphrates Basin used to rely directly on this river are now suffering. And we are having absolutely environmental risks, drying lake, reservoir, water level dropping, risk of desertification, land degradation, and the wildlife is threatened. We're losing habitat. Also, there is an increased pollution surrounding the Euphrates River. This image was taken in 2023. These ships were supposed to be inside the river, but the river is getting smaller by time. So yeah, this is the situation in Euphrates now. Moving forward to Khabur. Khabur is also, as I said, is a very important river in Syria. This image is in April 2020. This was how the Khabur looked like. And the image below is from August 2025. This is how the Khabur looks now. It's totally dried. So the current status of Khabur is drought or reduced flow. The river has been drying up over the years. In many places, its flows has reduced drastically. In some location, it is nearly or completely dry, like the inside of Hasaka. This image taken in August 2025 is from Hasaka. Why it has reduced? To start with, we're having a climate change issue in Syria and in all of the area too. But on the other hand, several dams were constructed on the Khabur River by Turkish-backed armed group in areas under their control. The result, dozens of villages, nearly 80 along the river and more nearby, lost reliable access to the river water for irrigation and domestic use. One of the other issues we're having in Syria too was that all of the parties that were part of the Syrian conflict has been violating the environment by deforestation. And I'm here now showing the case of Afrin. Afrin is a Kurdish majority city. Afrin was also taken over by the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army in 2018. Hereby is the image. This image is taken in February 6, 2018. It was documented by Syrians for Truth and Justice. This is Meydanke Lake. It is one of the most famous lakes in Afrin. This is Meydanke Lake in 2018, and this is Meydanke Lake in 2023. The amount of the reduction of the green cover is totally obvious in this area. Allow me to get back. The amount of the deforestation is obvious in the area nearby the lake. Okay, so what happened in Afrin? The deforestation was already happening in Syria in national parks and protected areas, given that there was a war, there was no fuel, so people were depending on trees in order to use them for firewoods. But the northwestern Kurdish city of Afrin was one of the areas that had the most widespread deforestation. Trees have been cut for fuel, especially during winter, when heating or fuel are scarce. Displaced people use wood, and areas under conflict have been stripped. On the other hand, the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army factions were the main responsible for deforestation, selling firewoods and building military bases in forest areas. On the other hand, and unfortunately, some NGOs were part of deforestation by building residential communities for IDPs inside of the forest. Allow me to share this image too. This is from a forest in Afrin called Bafilion. This image was taken before the entrance of Turkish-backed Syrian National Army. It's a satellite image, obviously. And this is in 2021. I think the reduction is the amount of green cover that was reduced is totally obvious in the two images. As I mentioned, Syria already suffers from a reduced rainfall, more frequent droughts, higher temperature, specifically in the northeast. On the other hand, these trends worsen water scarcity and push more reliances on groundwater, with risk of overpumping and contamination. And also it makes forests more vulnerable to fire and degradation. And as a country that has been in a continuous war since 14 years ago, absolutely conflict intensified the damage. Armed parties, as I mentioned, weaponized water by cutting supply, controlling dams or pumping station, or damaging an infrastructure. And also we're having pollution, oil spills, waste dumping, insufficient sanitation, and collapse of sewage system. And on the other hand, lands and forests are damaged by the military activities. And also we're still suffering from lack of governance. So the environmental harm are not side effects. They are central to life, livelihood, health, social stability. And water and green cover are a lifeline for agriculture, drinking water resilience to shock. So we're going through a transitional justice phase now in Syria. But unfortunately, I should have mentioned it before, the violations against the environment are considered soft violations, given that there are mass crimes, there are crimes of war and crimes against humanity. So no one is really paying a good attention about what to do about the environment. How should we fix what we have done in the last 14 years? So in STJ, we have been thinking about how to address environment and climate-related issues in transitional justice, starting with the procedures, with one of the most important procedures in transitional justice phase, which is documenting the truth. So we should expand a truth commission or investigative bodies to mandate documentation of environmental harms, testimonies from affected communities about health, access to water, and degraded forest land. On the other hand, we should do public hearings in affected areas, water basins, Orontes, Khabur, Euphrates, and forests in northwest of Syria and northeastern part of Syria. And also we should map responsibility. Who ordered or who allowed the damage? Regarding the legal accountability and prosecution, we should recognize environmental destruction and the destruction of water infrastructure as war crimes or crimes under the international humanitarian law and the environmental law. Cases could be brought domestically or internationally for actors who used water as a weapon, polluted rivers intentionally, and destroyed dams, because this destruction has a long-term effect on the people. Where direct responsibility is hard, employ joint liability, command responsibility, corporate responsibility if firm or contractors involved. And in reparation and restoration, reparation not only monetary, ecological restoration should be done too. Ensure access to clean water, because the situation of Alok pumping station that I started my presentation with is still continuous until now. So rebuilding water treatment infrastructure is part of the reparation that people in this area really need. And also consider collective reparation for ecosystem service lost. Finally, institutional reform and governance. We should strengthen the legal and regulatory framework protecting environment, because until now in Syria, unfortunately, there is a new government, but there is no Ministry of Environment. And on the other hand, we should really include the community participation in water and forest governance, specifically for the most affected groups and for the marginalized group and IDPs. And also in memory, education, and participation, there should be some step done. We should be focusing in the curriculum in Syria on the environmental rights, the climate change, and the sustainable practices that keeps us from the huge issue we're having in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sima, for that very insightful presentation on what is going on in Syria. For those who are just joining us, that was Simab Hassan from the Syrian for Truth and Justice organization in Syria. She was presenting to us, touching on a number of critical issues, including deforestation, the weaponization of water, transboundary water resources, the wildlife laws, pollution, and what transitional justice can do. Thank you so much, Simab. Find her bio on the chat. And I also invite you, for those who've just joined us, to visit the chat where you'll find more information on the 2025 Al-Mumin Award ceremony tomorrow that we mentioned earlier, the Path to Ottawa events, and also the association and other upcoming events in relation to the fourth conference. Feel free to use the chat to share your questions, your comments, and also your insights to enrich the discussion that we are having. Our next presenter, allow me to welcome Dr. Fabricio Telo. Dr. Telo is a sociology instructor at the Department of Sociology in Kwantlen Polytechnic University, British Columbia in Canada. Fabricio has been contributing to Brazil's Peace and Truth Commission and advocating for agrarian reform and reparation to victims of violence in rural Brazil. Find his full bio on the chat. Dr. Fabricio, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Munini. I wonder if Sima can stop sharing her screen so I can share mine. Thank you. Let me make it full screen. So hello, everyone. I am joining you from the unceded and traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples in a region that is also called Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada. I am originally from Brazil, and I am part of Brazil's Peasant Truth Commission. And that is where I am going to speak from, based on my experience as a member of that organization. So my presentation is divided into three parts. First, I'll introduce the context of transitional justice in Brazil and the Peasant Truth Commission. Then I will talk about the connection between the expansion of the agricultural frontier, the increase in the deforestation, and the increase in the rates of rural violence in Brazil. especially in the Amazon. And finally, I'll talk about initiatives to hold corporations accountable for human rights violations. So the transitional justice process in Brazil refers to the massive human rights violations that happened during the military dictatorship that took place in Brazil between 1964 and 1985. And unlike many other transitional justice processes elsewhere, in the case of Brazil, the first kind of initiative that took place to address those violations was not the creation of a truth commission. The Truth Commission in Brazil was created only almost 30 years after the end of the dictatorship in 2011. The first kind of policy was reparation policies. So the first big commission created was the Special Commission on Political Death and Disappearances in 1995. There were other small initiatives previous to that, but they were not national or significant enough to be included here in this overview. And then in 2002, the federal government created the Amnesty Commission, which was meant to broaden the scope of violations that could be object of reparation, since the previous commission was focused only on victims of assassination or forced disappearance. And so the investigations that were done by these two commissions and the documents that were collected mainly, because the onus of the proof was on the victims. So the information collected through the applications for reparation through these two commissions helped a lot the National Truth Commission that was created in 2011. And then, as a result of the creation of the National Truth Commission, several other truth commissions were created at state levels. For example, I worked in a research project for the Rio de Janeiro State Truth Commission on human rights violations in the countryside, municipal level, and also civil society level. So the Peasant Truth Commission is an example of a civil society level organization, and it was created in 2012 during this unitary Congress of the workers of the countryside, the waters, and the forests. So it included peasants, indigenous peoples, people who live in the shores of rivers, fishers, a very wide variety of people in this Congress in Brasilia. And one of the resolutions of this Congress was the creation of the Peasant Truth Commission with the goal of supporting the National Truth Commission in the investigation of human rights violations in the countryside, particularly against peasants. There was a discussion around whether this commission should also investigate human rights violations against indigenous peoples, but then it was decided that a separate commission should be created specifically for indigenous peoples. And this happened on a civil society level. And now there is a campaign for the government to officially create by a bill that should be passed in the Congress, a national indigenous truth commission. There will be an event in a few weeks where indigenous organizations will meet with several ministers to formalize that request. So more to see on that. So that is in a very summarized overview, a summary of the context of transitional justice in Brazil. So now I will focus on the connection between the expansion of the agricultural frontier, which happened more intensely during the dictatorship. Not that it started there, but it intensified because of the vision that the military had about the Amazon and the role of agriculture in the economy. How that expansion led to an increase in deforestation, and as a consequence, an increase in rural violence. So the picture that I chose to kind of introduce this topic is the inauguration of this highway that is called the Trans-Amazonian, which was in 1970 that it started to be built. And it marked the beginning of this process of getting in the forest and invading, I would say, the forest through a road, which then facilitated the extraction of natural resources, land grabbing, etc. And one of the main reasons for that was a vision that the military had that the Amazon was a key region for natural security. Partly because in the 1950s there was a proposition from global north countries to make the Amazon an international area. So Brazil would not be in charge of that part of its territory. And for the military, that idea of national security and a national territory that should be taken care of by the armed forces was key. And when they took over the government in 1964, they defined the Amazon as a priority, and they created this specific focus on the Amazon. And the other reason is this idea of developmentalism, which believes that for the economy to move forward, there needs to be initiatives from the government in order to develop the nation through agriculture and industry. Mainly industry, but agriculture plays a role in that connection, because without agriculture, I mean, the role of the industry and agriculture together, the industry can help agriculture to be more productive. So there is a concept of agro-industry, for example, that helps understand that. I also wanted to highlight another important figure in this picture, which is the Minister of Transportation, Mario Andreasa, who was a military as well, and he was connected to the company that the Peasant Truth Commission is investigating, one of the companies, which is called Josapar. So I'll talk more about that company in the third part of my presentation. But I wanted to highlight that for now, just to highlight the partnership between the military and the corporate sector. So I brought also two pictures of promotional ads that both the government and private companies would publish in magazines. So the magazine Realidade in 1972 published these ads, one by Sudam. Sudam is the superintendents for the development of the Amazon. It's a governmental agency, and they were promoting the idea of exploring the Amazon. So the government would give fiscal incentives for companies, mainly big companies, to invest in the Amazon, to initiate cattle raising, for example, to initiate industry. And so you can see enough with legends, let's make money. That's the translation of this left figure. And then in the right picture, we have a promotional ad from a construction company called Andrade Gutierrez, which was the one responsible for building the Trans-Amazonian. And it's interesting to see the translation of this title. To unify the Brazilians, we go in the green hell. So they call the Amazon the green hell. And so this is just to illustrate how the vision, the ideology at the time justified environmental degradation and the idea that the Amazon should be exploited, and it was a passive instead of natural wealth that should be taken care of. It was seen as something that was creating obstacles for the development. So as a consequence of that, we have the increase in the deforestation, especially in the south of the Amazon, which is the area that made what is called the agricultural frontier. So you see it to the right here, you have the state of Maranhão and Pará. And here you have the north of Mato Grosso. Here you have Rondônia, which is one of the states that deforested the most. And here you have Acre. And you can also see some areas of deforestation along the Amazon River. And so in black, you see deforestation between the year of 2000 and 2013, and in red, deforestation before the year of 2000. And then I brought here a few numbers that were collected, that were put together by the landless movement in Brazil, with the number of rural workers killed during the dictatorship. And I wanted to highlight the fact that these numbers are underestimated by a lot, because these numbers come from documents that were available. And we know that the reality of the Brazilian countryside during the dictatorship is that many people would be killed and disappeared. Their bodies would be disappeared without any registration, without any note being formally taken by the police or any organization. So it's not by chance that you have very few numbers in the 1960s and you see an increase in the numbers in the 1970s and 80s. when you have the creation of organizations like the Land Pastoral Commission, which was created in 1975 with the purpose of supporting peasants in their struggles to remain in the lands that they were occupying, and also supporting their struggle for agrarian reform. That is one reason for the increase in the number in the late 1970s and 1980s. But in addition to that, we have other reasons for that increase. As I mentioned, the expansion of the agricultural frontier, which led to more land grabbers trying to appropriate land in order to raise cattle or produce soya. And the other element is that especially after the beginning of the 1980s, we have the creation of rural social movements, for example, the landless movement. And they started to organize campaigns and also occupy areas of land that were not being used, like unproductive land, in order to pressure the government to implement agrarian reform policies and create rural settlements. So as a result, or as a reaction to that process of mobilization by peasants and especially landless workers, the agrarian oligarchs organized as well, and they created what was called the ironically democratic ruralist union, which was led by a politician who is now the governor of the state of Goiás, Ronaldo Caiado, who ran for president in 1989 and is trying to run again for president in 2026. And this organization publicly defended the use of arms, weapons, in order to oppose the landless movements. And so that is one of the reasons, or I would say the main reason, for the sharp increase in the number of assassinations in the 1980s.
5 minutes, Telo?
5 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you so much. That's great. And so, again, I just wanted to reinforce the fact that these numbers are underestimated. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is that not only peasants, but also, and I would say mainly indigenous peoples were victims. In this case, we can also use the concept of genocide, because in the case of the Waimiri people in northern Amazon, their group was almost decimated, and there are accounts of use of bombs and even a substance of called napalm, and the army would release napalm over the village, and this drawing was done by Waimiri child in 1986 to illustrate that process, which was traumatic for that community. I will move now forward to my third and last part, which is about the attempts to hold corporations involved in those processes accountable for their wrongdoings. So this process didn't start necessarily with the National Truth Commission, because there were initiatives before that, but it advanced significantly with the creation of this working group within the National Youth Commission on workers and the labor movement. And so one of the main focuses of that working group was the complicity between the private sector and the dictatorship. And so as a result of that, the first company that the public prosecutors in Brazil formally investigated was the German car maker Volkswagen, which had a subsidiary in Brazil. And so between 2015 and 2020, the public prosecutors conducted this investigation, which resulted in an agreement between the public prosecutors and the company in order to avoid a judicial trial. And so one of the components of that agreement was the donation, and I am using the term donation because it was the term that the company wanted to use instead of reparation, and we can talk more about that if you want later. But part of that donation was for the victims who were tortured and imprisoned in the facilities of the company. But another small part, which is what I'm going to talk about here, was dedicated to fund new research projects on other companies that were complicit with the dictatorship. So this is the list of companies. I want to highlight here three of them that were more directly involved in environmental harm. Petrobras, which is the largest company in Brazil. It's state-owned. It's an oil company. Josapar, which is the company that the Peasant Truth Commission investigated, which is agro business company in the state of Pará, and a mining company called Paranapanema, which committed human rights violations against indigenous peoples in the state of Amazonas, and also left large areas of land deforested. I want to conclude with a reflection on the importance of the civil society mobilization to put pressure both on the public prosecutor's office, which plays a central role. It has been playing a central role in transitional justice in Brazil, and the state in general, in the process of trying to hold corporations accountable. So I am using here the concept of, or the analogy of the Archimedes lever used by Payne Pereira and Bernal Bermudez in their book Transitional Justice and Corporate Accountability. From below, that's their approach. From below, because it means it's a process that is based on grassroots mobilization. So the stronger civil society organizations are, and the stronger the campaigns are to hold corporations accountable, the more likely it is that the corporations will be held accountable, and that their veto power will not play as much role, because as we know, corporations have a lot of power, both from their economic and political power, to create obstacles for the accountability process. So my final message, I would say, is for us to have it clear in our minds the importance of engagement and supporting civil society organizations, especially the organizations of victims of the violations. And I apologize if I went over time. That is my presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fabricio. You don't have to apologize because that presentation is very important and informative. And it's actually enriching the discussions that we're having on how then does transitional justice deal with the issues that you have raised. Thank you so much for that presentation. We appreciate. So allow me to take the opportunity and welcome our next presenter. That is Mr. Maxim Popov. Maxim Popov is an environmental justice expert. He was the advisor to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine since October 2022 to April 2025, where he led the process of directing prosecutions related to ecocide and environmental war crimes resulting from the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Maxim Popov, it's your time. Welcome and take the floor.
Thank you so much, Munini. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Good.
Please proceed.
Thanks. Good day to everyone, dear colleagues. Carl, hello. Annika, hi, dear colleagues again. It's a big honor and a pleasure for me, and thank you so much for invitation to share with you a little bit about the experience of Ukraine to document, investigate, and prosecute environmental damage during the ongoing armed conflict. As you all probably know, Ukraine right now is in the midst of the ongoing unprovoked full-scale aggression of the Russian Federation that started basically the full-scale phase started in 2022 and the aggression itself started in 2014. And Russia's war is not only an armed attack against the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine, it's also an assault of our environment, our natural resources, and our future. The deliberate targeting of energy infrastructure, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam and other dams caused the floodings, forest fires from shelling, and the contamination of soil and water are methods of warfare used by Russian Federation that violate international humanitarian law. According to the Articles 35 and 55 of Protocol Additional to Geneva Conventions, it is prohibited to employ methods or means of warfare which are intended or may be expected to cause widespread, long-term, and severe damage to the natural environment. Russia, in its turn, has consistently ignored these rules, treating the environment as a weapon of war. This aggression has therefore created a dual challenge, defending our people and territory while at the same time documenting and prosecuting unprecedented environmental crimes. Russia's full-scale invasion has caused environmental destruction of historic proportions. Over 25% of the territory of our country is contaminated with the landmines. Numerous protected areas, national parks, and Ramsar's wetlands of international importance have been destroyed or damaged. The destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric dam by Russian forces on June 2023 stands as one of the gravest environmental crimes. More than 80 settlements flooded, 35 people died, ecosystems drained and damaged irreversibly. From the very first day of the full-scale invasion in February 2022, the Prosecutor General's Office and law enforcement agencies started documenting, investigating all incidents of the war crimes, including the war crimes that affect natural environment. In autumn 2022, Prosecutor General Andriy Kostin prioritized investigation and prosecution of environmental war crimes with the motto that environment should no longer be the silent victim of war. The government of Ukraine, in its turn, prepared and approved the methodologies for documenting and evaluation of the environmental damage caused by the Russian aggression, and also empowered State Environmental Inspectorate to document environmental harm caused by the aggression. So far, Ukraine has registered almost 10,000 incidents of environmental damage. Prosecutor General's office registered almost 300 incidents of environmental war crimes. According to the numerous experts, the dam, the Kakhovka Dam, was an object essential for the survival of the civilian population. Its destruction triggered what experts classified as a large-scale, long-term, and serious harm to the environment. According to the independent report, Submerged, prepared by our partners Project Expedite Justice and Truth Hounds, the destruction of Kakhovka Dam flooded more than 600 square kilometers of territory, forced mass evacuations and migration, destroyed over 1,800 homes in Kherson, and collapsed irrigation system affecting nearly 6,000 square kilometers of agricultural land. The report further documented toxic contamination, ecosystem collapse, and cultural losses, and concluded that the act fulfills all elements of the war crime under Article 8.2b4 of the Rome Statute. To deal with these unprecedented challenges, Ukraine has established a specialized environmental prosecutor's office dedicated to prosecuting environmental crimes generally and environmental war crimes in particular. It coordinates with regional war crime units, environmental inspectorates, and international partners such as the International Criminal Court, Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group for Ukraine, and numerous NGOs, local and foreign. As for the legal framework for investigating and the prosecuting of such cases, under the Criminal Code of Ukraine, Ukraine has few options to deal with that. Article 438 that constitutes responsibility for the war crimes, and Article 441 of the Criminal Code that constitutes and establishes the responsibility for the ecocide. Under ecocide, in accordance with Ukrainian legislation, is meant the mass destruction of flora and fauna, poisoning of water and air, as well as any other actions that may cause environmental disaster. So far, Prosecutor General's office, as I already told, registered almost 300 incidents of environmental war crimes. And this is a landmark step. Ukraine is setting a precedent for individual criminal responsibility for wartime environmental damage. Yet challenges remain. Lack of the case law, absence of international definition of ecocide, and scientific complexity of evidence collection. Transitional justice must evolve. It's not only about human rights violations in the traditional sense, but also about environmental rights and ecological integrity. The experience of Colombia has shown the truth, and the Brazil has shown that truth commissions and reparations can recognize the environment as a victim. Ukraine is moving in the same direction, supported by the document that is called Environmental Compact for Ukraine, which set out 3 main priority areas that are extremely important for the transitional justice afterwards. First area is that the documenting of environmental harm is essential. The second component is necessity to bring accountability for the wartime environmental damage, both individual criminal responsibility and the financial responsibility. And the third final component that in particular deals with the transitional justice is a green recovery. In practice, transitional justice frameworks must evolve in the following ways: recognition of the environment as a victim, truth commissions, reparations programs, and memorialization must explicitly include ecological harm and climate impacts. Integration of scientific expertise, that it should bring in climate scientists, ecologists, and technical experts alongside lawyers to establish facts and design remedies. restorative and forward-looking measures. Reparations should include ecological restoration, reforestation, mine clearings, renewable energy projects, and climate adaptation initiatives. By the way, I'd like to stress the attention that in 2023, the Register of Damages for Ukraine was established in The Hague by the Enlargement Partial Agreement under the auspices of the Council of Europe. Basically, that is the mechanism for recording of all damages caused by the Russian Federation in Ukraine. And among the categories of damages that may be recorded by this register, it is specifically outlined the category 8B that provide the opportunity for the state of Ukraine to apply to the register the environmental damage and damage to the natural resources. In this case, Ukraine's approach, as reflected in the Environmental Compact, already provides a model for how transitional justice can address both environmental degradation and the challenges of climate change in conflict contexts. Ukraine's experience also demonstrates the critical importance of cooperation with independent organizations and civil society organizations. Our prosecutorial practice has been enriched by partnerships with numerous civil society organizations that provide expertise, evidence, and methodology. For example, the Climate Council Guide to Identifying and Framing Environmental War Crimes in Ukraine, third edition that was issued in 2025, offers a structured methodology for legal qualification and evidence collection. Likewise, the Submerged report by Project Expedite Justice and Truth Hounds provide a model of comprehensive investigation and analysis of the Hovkadem case. These collaborations highlight that achieving justice for environmental war crimes require a coalition between state institutions and civil society actors. Also, Ukraine's experience and prosecution of environmental war crimes has already catalyzed the discussion for the recognition of ecocide as an international crime, because in our criminal code, ecocide is a part of the chapter of the criminal code that contain crimes against international peace and order. So in comparison with the Syria and everything that was told by Simao, it's not considered as a small or minor crimes. It is considered as a grave crime, and we deal with it as with international crime. In conclusion, I'd like to say that the future of transitional justice must include environmental justice. For Ukraine, this means justice for our people and our land. For the world, it means setting new standards for accountability. Let us make sure that crimes against the environment are recognized, prosecuted, and remembered, because protecting nature is protecting humanity's future. Thank you so much for your attention. I intentionally shortened my speech to benefit from the discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much, Maxime, for those insights and for that presentation regarding the environmental harms and damage and crimes that are happening in Ukraine following the Russian invasion. At this juncture, allow me to welcome our participants to raise their hands or put in the chat their questions. Though I want to believe we have questions in the chat, so allow me to invite Loeva Georges, who is the co-chair of the Transitional Justice Interest Group, to give us the questions that are already in the chat before I give the questions at my end. Thank you, Loeva. The floor is yours.
Hello. Yes, so there are a few questions. Mainly, there was one to Fabricio from James Conti, asking about a case for describing environmental damage in the Amazon as potentially, and the activity of cooperation as ecocidal. And would this add another layer of accountability?
Thank you very much. I can also add to the questions before Fabricio takes that one, so that all the panelists have their question. A question to Simav. Simav, transitional justice processes are usually national processes. In your presentation, you talked about transboundary resources that are part of the discussion on environmental harms or crimes. How do you see the issue of transboundary resources, the accountability on that, and national processes that are focused only on the national? A question to Fabricio. You talked about the companies that gave donations that were meant for reparations. Were there any donations that were meant for restoration, rehabilitation of the ecosystems that were given? Was it even a topic that was discussed at that time? A question to Maxime. You talked about the documentation. Does the documentation also document environmental victims? Persons who are victims because of the environmental damage. For instance, if you talk about poisoned waters, people who are drinking poisoned water, then they're dying, they're getting sick. Is that documentation also in the category you talked about? And then also to Maxime, you talk a lot about the prosecutions that should take place in reference to the Ukraine issue. Is there another avenue other than the court prosecution that you see transitional justice can actually incorporate in this process? Thank you so much. So, Fabricio, Simav, and Maxime.
We have another question in the chat.
Okay, sure, please go.
About how the civil society in the UK specifically could best support specific issues of climate, environmental, transitional justice in Ukraine and Brazil. So to Maxime and Fabrizio.
So should I go?
Fabrizio, maybe you can start.
Thank you all for the questions. So starting with, I guess, James. Yes, there are many cases, and I will highlight two things. The first is that the Congress is discussing right now a bill to incorporate the crime of ecocide in the legislation. It was already approved in one commission, the Environmental Commission in the Chamber of Deputies. Now it went to the Commission of Justice and Constitution, which then it's a much more challenging goal to pass that bill there, because right now the Brazilian Congress is dominated by politicians who have a very different understanding about the importance of preserving the environment. In fact, very recently, the chamber passed a bill that flexibilizes the environmental legislation. So unfortunately, that's what is happening right now. But one example of that, and that is one of the reasons why this bill was proposed, is that in 2009, the first year of the Bolsonaro government, there was a vast increase in fires in the Amazon. Many of them on purpose, in addition to the natural fires that happen every year. So that can be, that would be the example I would give you, and that for sure would add another layer for the process of accountability. And in this case, I am using the idea of corporations as a very broad term that includes private agents, even if they are not officially a corporation. And I am doing that following the approach that Payne Pereira and Bernal Bermudez apply in their book on corporate accountability. So that is my comment for the first question. Regarding the second question, Munini, if there were donations for the restoration of the environment, in the case that the public prosecutors moved regarding the Waimiri Atuari people, the decision from the judge included a determination for environmental restoration, including other things like the need for informed consent from the Waimiri Atuari to build any new infrastructure projects in their territory. So there have been some advancements in that area, especially when it comes to trials in the judiciary moved by the federal public prosecutors. And the last question, let me see, I didn't catch. How might civil society in the UK best support the specific issues of climate in Ukraine and Brazil? I think that civil society, not only in the UK, but in any other countries, especially in the global north, is to initiate international solidarity initiatives. I am part of an organization here in Vancouver that is called Co-Development Canada. And its goal is precisely to build bridges between Canadian unions and Latin American grassroots organizations. It was created in 1985 to help especially unions, teacher unions in Central America that were being repressed during the civil wars there. And now it has broadened and it develops partnerships between several kinds of unions and grassroots organizations in Latin America. And that makes a lot of difference for the grassroots organizations in the Global South. So that could be one thing. I'm happy to talk more about that if you want, Manda. I can give you my contacts. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank
That
you,
was really helpful.
Fabricio. Okay. Sima?
Thank you, Munini, for the question. So indeed, transitional justice is primarily it's a national process, but we have a complex problem when it comes to transboundary water resources. To start with, the convention that regulates the water release was signed in '83 when this area was not suffering that much, if I'm allowed to say, from climate change, when there was not a war in this area. So to start with, I think we need to come up with a new regulation that takes climate change into account and also takes the war factor into account. On the other hand, what can we realistically do? I think we can start by recognize the limit and necessity of cooperation. Given that transitional justice in Syria cannot directly prosecute foreign states controlling water upstream, but it can document the harms caused by upstream restrictions and include them in truth-seeking efforts, in fact-finding efforts, and reparation plannings. And also, Syrians' transitional justice bodies can acknowledge transboundary harm as part of national suffering, showing how reduced flows, damming caused economical, social, and ecological damage. So I believe there is a plan to come up with, modified with being the transitional justice a national process, but also taking the neighboring countries' damage into account.
Thank you very much. Maxim?
Yes, thank you so much, Munini. So I made notes. First question was if there are affected people by environmental war crimes considered as victims in the criminal proceedings, right? So here I would say that Ukrainian legislation, specifically criminal procedural codes, provide the definition of the victim. And a victim in a criminal proceeding may be an individual who has sustained moral, physical, or material damage as a result of a criminal offense, as well as a legal entity that has sustained the material damage. So potentially, and in reality, people affected by the war crimes that affected the environment in its turn may be considered as the victims within the criminal cases. That could be direct victims, like let's say in Kakhovka Dam case, as a result of flooding, 35 people died. So basically, these people are considered automatically as the victims. But thousands of people have had to change their livelihood, had to change the place of their residence. They suffered from the material and obviously moral damage, and they have the possibility to apply to make a motion within the criminal case to be considered as the victims. So such possibility is provided by the criminal procedural legislation of Ukraine. I will tell you more. Within the criminal case of the Kakhovka Dam, the Prosecutor General's office even initiated one exercise, I would say, to overcome one challenge. There is a big problem to prove causal link between the environmental damage and public health issues. So within this case, prosecutors and investigators, they came to Zaporizhia region where the reservoir was before, and as a result of the draining of the reservoir, on the bottom of this reservoir, the heavy metals released. And the scientific theory was that people living on the coast of this reservoir may be affected by the heavy metals. And we collected more than 100 samples of hair among the children living in that area and sent them to the lab to try to identify if there were any contamination by the heavy metals. And the methodology, how it was done, was based on the theory that our hair is growing like 1 centimeter per month. So we collected hairs from children with like hair more than 15 centimeters, half a year after the Kakhovka Dam destruction. And we took 2 samples from one person. One is closer to the head and one is higher. And then to compare them if there is difference in the level of the contamination of heavy metals. So even such initiatives have been done by the Prosecutor General's office. And by the way, here I can come to the question about the role of the civil society organizations, not only from UK. So this initiative basically was supported by one of our partnering non-governmental organization, Justice Rapid Response from Switzerland. They basically supported this mission and they paid for the lab analysis in Italy. Hopefully, as a result of this analysis, there were no big level of contamination of heavy metal among the children in that area. But the answer to your question is yes, there is a possibility to recognize people affected by the harm to natural environment as the victims within the criminal cases. The second question was about are there any other avenues, right, apart from the criminal cases that may be used? yes, there are other avenues. I already mentioned that apart from the criminal responsibility, there should be a financial responsibility as well. So for these purposes, Ukraine advocated and basically did it. The register of damages for Ukraine was created to record all types of damages that caused by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. By the way, there is also the possibility to for the state to apply and to with the damages to the climate, basically calculating greenhouse gas emissions resulted by the war. So I believe that is the main avenue that should be used in parallel with the criminal investigations. And as for the role of the NGOs and civil society organizations, I would also add that the first thing that NGO may document the environmental harm by themselves and interview victims, what they do in Ukraine. NGOs may support the investigation itself. I already mentioned the example of such cooperation. Also, it is extremely important in terms of establishing the truth is advocacy campaigns for the public awareness. In light of Russian propaganda, it is extremely important for Ukraine that a lot of our partners locally and in other states advocating and sharing the truth about the real consequences of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, including for the natural environment. And of course, sharing the experience, because the governmental capacities, especially during the ongoing aggression, sometimes limited. And we have the numerous cases of cooperation when we were provided by different types of expertise that we didn't have at the moment. For example, some NGOs have access to the commercial satellite images that exist of environmental harm. That could be also the avenue for cooperation between the state and the NGOs during the armed conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very loaded explanations. That is appreciated from our three panelists. Thank you so much for attending to the questions that have been set. Our time is fast spent, so allow me to start thanking our panelists for preparing so well to present the topic of today and for enriching the field of transitional justice with your insights in the topic of the future of transitional justice amidst the realities of environment and climate change challenges. Allow me to thank our participants for joining us. Thank you so much for your questions and for your time and for being with us until this time. And allow me also to thank our technical team, the persons who are working behind the curtains, Anika, Mara, and Karishma, who are making sure that the channels are working and we are on. I want to thank my co-chair in the Transitional Justice Interest Group, Loeva. Thank you so much for supporting this process. And the entire leadership of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, led by Professor Carl Brook and the president, Professor Erica Withall, for the support. Allow me to give this opportunity to Professor Carl Brook to share a few remarks before we close. Carl, please.
Thank you very much, Munini. And I find the process of transitional justice to be fascinating because in many ways it seeks to find a pathway forward while having some justice, but not necessarily full absolute accountability for every wrong. And I was just talking with a colleague from Iraq who was saying that the UN Compensation Commission, which isn't, it's more accountability than transitional justice, but it was imperfect. There were a lot of things that the commission did not award. But there was a process of justice. And one of the really interesting things is that 35 years after the conflict, Iraq and Kuwait do a lot of cooperation, environmental cooperation. And Iraq does not cooperate much with Iran. There was no process, accountability or transitional justice or anything. There was no process. And socially, there is a lot of ill will still between the countries. And I think that the question of what role the environment has in transitional justice is one that the international community has been increasingly looking at. And I would command to people's attention the paper that Munini led on environmental considerations in the AU transitional justice process. And maybe somebody can put that link in the chat. But I think it's what we're talking about here is both reinforcing in many ways the accountability processes, but supplementing them with other processes that are still very innovative. And I would very much like to extend my appreciation to the speakers, and hope you all stay safe in these crazy times. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you for those remarks and for closing the meeting. Allow me to mention that we have seen there are extra questions on the chat. We're going to connect those questions from those participants with the panelists so that they can continue to answer the questions. So feel free to join us tomorrow at the 2025 Al-Momin Award ceremony, where we will be discussing more on the Palestine, Jordan, and Israel issue, also looking at the matters of environment. Without much ado, allow me to thank you once again for being with us, for your time. And till we meet again, God take care of you and keep you well. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Thanks, Munini.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.